Hello everyone and welcome back to the joy of carving. In today's video I'm going to show you how you can carve this simple whittled fox. From there you can progress even further and add more details like I've done here. I've added inset eyes and fur and I've painted parts of it. But in this video I'm going to cover the basics and I'm going to show you how you can carve the simple whittled version of this. So as always, get yourself a cup of tea or a coffee, sit back and let's begin the joy of carving. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to transfer the design for the fox onto our basswood blank. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Some wood carvers prefer to print out their designs and then glue that to the wood, but personally I just prefer to draw it straight onto the wood. It's just easier for me. But what you'll need is a front view and a side view. What we're going to do is draw the front view first. We'll cut that out. Then we'll draw on the profile, the side view, and then we'll cut that out after. Once you've done that, you'll end up with something that looks like this, which gives us a fantastic starting point because we don't have to start from a square piece of wood. We can already see the shape of the fox here. And we'll begin the carving just by drawing straight onto the piece of wood the shape of those front legs. And I've been quite sneaky here as well. I've chosen a design that hides the feet of the fox. And there's two reasons I've chosen that. One is because it just makes it much more simpler to follow. I feel like it's an easier form and shape to carve. And number two is I just like the design. I like this pose. So we've drawn our legs in and now I'm just drawing the shape of the tail around that body where it's going to wrap around. And there I'm just marking out the small section that I want to cut out. So begin just by carving away that piece of the tail that we don't want. I'm wearing a thumb sheath here and just using my technique of carving towards myself, but if you don't have a thumb sheath, reverse the grip like I'm demonstrating there and gently push on the back of the blade, carving away from yourself. And there we can see that that small section of the tail has been removed. And one of the things that I'd like to do as I'm carving is I'm constantly drawing on the actual block of wood and marking out where I need to remove pieces, what I need to carve. So you can see there I'm drawing a small triangle and just scribbling out that piece because that's where part of the body is going to be formed. And by drawing out and marking on the wood itself, it's really going to help you visualize what it's going to look like and help give you a guide rather than just jumping straight into it and trying to carve it and visualize as you go. This gives you a really clear understanding of what section to carve. One of the challenging things about this particular carving is that we're working a lot with the very tip of the knife here because we need that smaller size of the blade in order to carve this detail because it is very, very fine. The only problem with doing this is the tip of the blade is the thinnest part of the metal. So if you apply too much pressure as you're carving, you can actually risk snapping the end of the blade here because you're putting too much force on the end of the blade. The principal technique I'm using to carve these detail pieces, the pieces of the legs, the front legs, the legs at the side and where the tail is I'm using stop cut. So you can see there, I'm very gently marking out a line where the front of the tail is going to be. And that stop cut provides a trench to carve into. So it will stop, the knife will be discouraged from going over onto the tail, which is the piece that I don't want to carve yet. So the stop cut creates a trench, which gives you a point to carve into, which you can see there. And the trick really to carving this piece is to just do tiny, tiny amounts at a time. Don't try and remove huge chunks of wood at once because you'll end up just making a mistake or ripping off a piece of the tail here. So it really is a case of just taking away tiny, tiny amounts with the very tip of the knife and just being as careful as possible. And you can see there that just from removing those small sections, it already gives a lot of shape to the fox. So repeat the process that we've just done on the opposite side. Mark out where you want the legs to be. Create your stop cuts like I am there, pressing the knife in gently and carving in towards that line using the tip of the knife to just very gently remove small increments at a time. Now that I have a good shape of the side of those legs, I'm going to start carving in the tail there. So I'm very, very gently using the tip of the knife to score in the line where the top of the tail is going to be. And that's going to, again, provide my stop cut to carve into. So just as before, this is a marathon, it's not a race. So just take away tiny, tiny amounts and don't be tempted to try and remove a lot of material at once. Just take your time. And you can see there that I'm basically carving a V shape. So I'm pushing the blade in on one side, then switching it to remove that piece of wood. I'll then carve the top side again. Once I'm happy with the depth of that, I'll push in it on the other side to remove the chunk of wood. Just keep repeating that process until you've got a good channel going all the way along the fox. For the front legs, we're going to use the exact same techniques. So marking with a pencil where you want those lines to be, then use the tip of the knife to score those lines in. Again, be really, really careful here. Gently score those pencil lines in to create that channel for us to carve into. It's a slightly awkward angle to carve here, but again, just use the very tip of the knife carving away from yourself, going down towards the feet. And just be mindful about where that blade is going, because we don't want to carve the front of the legs themselves. We're just carving out the gap between them there. And as you go, just continue to score in those lines, and that'll help you remove chunks of those wood that you're carving away as well. And that's the most awkward part of the carving itself. You can see here that the fox has a lot of shape now already. So just carving those legs and carving the shape of the tail all the way around the body is the most difficult part. I've been fortunate enough to have been sent these Beavercraft Whittling knives, and I have to say they're really, really good, really comfortable. This is the first time that I'm using them for this fox. I'll be doing a full product review video soon. If you're interested in purchasing some of these whittling knives, then I'll leave a link to their website in the description. And if you use that link as well, it really, really helps me out so that I can continue making wood carving tutorials and videos for you. So if you are interested, follow that link, and I'll also put a link to my website so that you can purchase the kit for this if you want to as well. So I really do think that the hard part of this carving is done. Those legs were the most challenging part. And now what we're doing is we're going over all of those straight, harsh edges and just rounding the whole piece there. And remember, if you're not comfortable with this carving technique, then just reverse it. Use your opposite thumb to just push gently on the back of the blade and carve away from yourself. Continue carving the back of the body and rounding all of those straight edges, but I'm stopping here at the ears because I want to do the head last and the ears especially last, because if I do them too early, because of how we're handling the piece, then we can risk snapping those up, and that's the last thing we want to do. So we'll carve the ears and the head last. With the head, we're whittling away both sides towards the nose into a V shape, and keep switching sides like I am there so that you can get a good gauge on the thickness of the head. And you can see there that I'm still avoiding those ears. I don't want to carve those yet. And I'm also carving across the grain here. So carving across the grain is absolutely fine, providing that the knife is sharp enough. But we need to carve at that angle in order to give the snout, the nose, as much shape as possible. Carving the actual top of the nose towards the eyes, you can see there that the technique that I'm using, I'm whittling away a very, very tiny piece using the tip of the knife. And if you look carefully, I'm actually flicking the blade up a little bit as I get towards the eyes. If we just carved straight ahead without flicking that knife up and twisting it towards the ears, towards the top of the head, then we'll just end up removing far too much material. So we need that little flick to just help the knife take off a smaller shaving. And you can see there that I'm using the exact same technique to carve those ears, that flick of the knife, that twist, to just carve a smaller shaving. And what that technique actually does is it creates a sort of V shape on the wood. So you start off carving a larger piece that then gets thinner and thinner and thinner because you're moving the blade away from the wood. So the piece gets smaller and smaller that you're carving. And we can now use those techniques that we used to carve the legs to just carve around the ear to just give it a little bit more shape. So just press the knife in gently, change the angle to the opposite side, press the knife in again to just start removing these V chunks, and that will give you some really good definition around those ears. Use the tip of the knife to just carve that space between the ears, the top of the head. And I can't stress enough here, use minimal force. We're working really, really close to our hands, as well as if you use too much force, you're going to risk cutting into one of the ears. You can either end up changing the shape because you removed a chunk of wood that you didn't mean to, or worse, chip off one of the ears entirely. So just be really, really careful with this part. And there's the whittled fox. So you can go further, you can drill some eye holes in. You can just mark those eyes out and use a detail drill to just drill the holes in, or the very tip of the knife. What I've done as well is I've progressed with this further, and I've utilized a lot of advanced techniques in order to add lots more further detail into this fox. And I am actually working on a book at the moment which is going to cover a lot of those advanced techniques. So you'll be able to take your whittling and your carving journey even further. But the pictures are just to illustrate the next stages that you could take this fox to. So you have your simple shape, and then once you know more advanced techniques, once you're more confident at carving, you can take the detail even further. I hope that video has been useful for you. If you do have any questions, leave a comment. I do try and answer them all. But I'll see you next time, and happy carvings, everyone.